Okay, my name is Howard Eber, and I am an alcoholic. I want to welcome everybody to week number 70 of this cycle of the Big Book Comes Alive Step Study Workshop. I anticipate we'll probably have about 4 weeks left, and then we'll be taking a week or so off and then back for a new cycle. So I'm starting to get those emails asking when are we starting over again. Right now, that's the best I can give you. It's about 4 weeks or so we'll be doing that. And remember, again, we have our Monday night meeting that continues the deep dive, and we now have the Tuesday night meeting, the Anvils of Experience. And on Wednesday, Kathy is doing her workshop, and on Thursday, I'm doing one with Steve. So we've got plenty of meetings going during the week, enough to make anybody sick of us. So come join us as often as you can. We'd love to see you. Okay, we are ending our cycle very much the way we began. We started out with the forwards, which were very much about history. Even Bill's story was a lot about that, concerned a lot of that. And we're ending the same way. Vision for You is about history. It uh, it poses a question of, well, once you've established this little group that you have around you, and you're getting people sober, and you're reaching out and helping more and more people. They were reaching out to Bill asking, well, what do we do now, Bill? And so Bill's response was, as it always is let me tell you our experience. And that's what we were talking about last week. We kind of just went over some of the uh, early days when it was spring 1935. And Bill was at that time 4 months sober, about 4 months. And he'd been hanging around with some of the his old friends on Wall Street now that he was sober, and he heard about a proxy fight going on at the National Rubber Machinery Company in Akron. And he made a quick study of the company and convinced some of his friends who had money on Wall Street that this was a sound idea. Financially, if we could get in there and win the proxy vote, which is just a collection of votes, when these companies take their stockholders have their meeting annually, and they vote on certain things. A lot of people aren't there for the actual vote, but they give proxies, which is like a voucher in a sense. And Bill felt that he can accumulate enough vouchers to take over the company. And if they did that, he would wind up being the chief executive officer, chief operating officer. I apologize. And his salary started about $250,000. Not bad, not bad. So he went out there, marshaled his forces, felt it was strong enough that he had enough backing. So he went back to New York, got all of his money people together, went back to Akron. And in the time that Bill was away, the other forces, labor, management, a lot of other forces that were at play in Akron also got their act together, and they formed a kind of a block vote that was based on, let's keep those New York money people out of Akron. Leave Akron for the Akronites. Let New York have its own way with their property and their companies. And sure enough, they lost the vote. And Bill's investors ditched him, left him in Akron, told him, see if you could figure out what just happened here, but we're out of here. And they left Bill at the Mayflower Hotel without even checking whether he had money to pay for his bill, and he did not. And Bill found himself in a very precarious situation. A Mayflower Hotel, and I guess we could start to use some of these props. Andy, let's take a look at number one, which is just a picture of the Mayflower. Um, the Mayflower still exists, most of you know. It is an assisted living facility, but they respect the history. So they have made a kind of a memorial, if you will, in the lobby that where a lot of this stuff we're talking about took place. That's the way the place looked back then. Looks very much the same now, but it's not a hotel anymore. As I said, it's an assisted living facility. Andy, if you can jump to, I guess, number two or three or four, any one of those will do. In the lobby, there we go. In the lobby, Bill found on one side of the lobby was a bar. And Andy, you could give me that would be, do I have one of those? No, I thought I had the picture of the bar. No. All right, not important. But in on one side was this bar where he can hear the laughter and the chinkling of the ice on the in the glasses and all of the merriment that goes on in the bar. And on the other side of the lobby was a phone booth and a church directory. And Bill realized that he was on very thin ice because he wanted to make contact. He wanted to have some human interaction during this weekend. He's going to be stuck in Akron. And he's depressed because his business deal just fell apart. And he's also now representing the bad guys in Akron. He's the New Yorkers. So he's not feeling on top of the world. And he was torn between walking into the bar to have a drink, and he realized he's on thin ice. So maybe I'll take it easy. I'll just have, say, oh, three drinks. I love how Bill reasoned that. He didn't go to one. I'll just have one. He knew himself better than that. He said, I'll just have three. Or maybe it'll be ginger ale. But he knew he was on thin ice, and he turned the other way, and he saw this church directory, and he found a name at the story goes that he found this name quite accidentally. And it was said that because Bill liked peculiar names, he picked this particular individual. Andy, if you'll give me number five, there's the lobby in Chile. He found this guy's name, Reverend Walter Tunks, picked the name arbitrarily out of that list on the wall. Andy, let's go back to one before to the that church listing again. There we go. It was suggested last week, and I did some research on it, that it wasn't as arbitrary as we have been told. That it's not just that he picked a name because it sounded real cool or it sounded real peculiar or sounded funny, but the story and it seems to have some validity. I've spoken to a number of people this week who said it sounds right. The story is that Bill in New York spent a lot of time with Sam Shoemaker, Reverend Shoemaker, who was the pastor of the Calvary Church in Manhattan, which was the New York headquarters for the Oxford Group. And when Sam Shoemaker heard Bill was going out to Akron, he told him, make sure you look up this guy, Walter Tunks. He's the man out there when it comes to the Oxford Group. Make sure you look him up. And Bill saw his name on this list. And someone else suggested last week, if you look carefully at the list, maybe it's in some kind of order. And I spoke to a number of people who pointed out that the order of that list, that directory, was constantly changing. What it was the day that Bill looked at it would be different than it was a month before or a month later. They were constantly making changes. So if we got a picture like this, at any given moment, it would be different than any other time we took a picture. So it's not necessarily the order, like that was the first name he saw, so he went to that. I believe that the Sam Shoemaker story makes a lot more sense. Shoemaker was a close friend of Bill's, was considered one of his sponsors, and if he knew Bill was going to Akron, there's no way he was not going to tell him to look up my friend Walter Tunks, who is the leading Oxford grouper in that town. And so he did. So he did. He contacted Walter Tunks and explained his situation, that he's an alcoholic, a rum hound from New York who needs another alcoholic to talk to. And he make any suggestions? And Walter Tunks said he doesn't personally know of any, but he gave him 10 names of some people that might know a pathway to an alcoholic. It was kind of a strange question if you think about it. In most cases, you'd think the guy would hang up on him when he says, I'm a rum hound from New York. I'm looking to talk to another drunk. Click. That's not what happened. He gave him 10 names. Story goes that you could take this down, Andy. Story goes that he tried the first nine without any success. The 10th name he called, person answered the phone. The person who answered the phone's name was Norman Shepherd. Shepherd. You know what a shepherd is? What a shepherd does? A shepherd guides the flock. A shepherd keeps those sheep together so they stay in a certain path and they go where the farmer wants them to go. Kind of interesting that that's the name of the guy that he was given that actually was able to point him to somebody. He knew of a woman in his local Oxford group, Henrietta Seiberling, who was looking for somebody to help a friend of hers who had recently declared in their group that he was a hopeless alcoholic and he needed help. And she was beside herself. And this guy calls from New York, and she said it was like manna from heaven that out of nowhere, this guy from New York should call. And he said, she said, young man, you come right over here, right over here. He gave her the address, went over to the gatehouse. Turns out that Henrietta Seiberling is the ex-wife of one of the executives that was involved in that proxy fight that Bill just went through. And kind of shows you how determined Bill was to find somebody because he didn't want to go talk to somebody by the name of Seiberling. He recognized that name as one of the owners of that tire company or another tire company in the area. But he went anyway. And by the time he got there, Henrietta had called Bob Smith. Smith wasn't there. His wife was, Annie Smith. And she's told Henrietta, I'm sorry, but tomorrow is Mother's Day. And the doctor has come home with a beautiful potted plant that is now sitting on top of my kitchen table. And the good doctor is now out cold underneath the kitchen table. So we got a potted plant on the table and a potted doctor under the table. So she said, come back tomorrow. And she put Bill up in her country club. Andy, if you can give me let's see what number it is. 155 2. This is the Portage, Portage Country Club that Henrietta had a piece of. She was not a poor woman by any means. Um, and this is where Bill stayed that night. And the next day she sent the car out to get him.
Have you
And
got the
that's what he
file
did.
name, Howard?
Huh?
Have you got the file name? It's not numbered on mine.
It just says Portage, Portage. Look familiar? Got it? Okay. It's not that big a deal. I mean, it's just a picture of a golf course, but it's something I didn't know about until recently. This is the Portage Country Club. Um, this is where Henrietta put Bill up. Bill stayed there for 2 weeks before he finally settled in with Bob and Annie. But this is where Bill stayed for the first period of time when he was there. One more I should show you, Andy, is number 7. I'm doing a lot of talking about Henrietta Seiberling, and I didn't show you who she is. This is Henrietta herself. There she is. Key person in our history, a link that is so vital to our being able to exist today. Um, so that's Henrietta. Henrietta told him to come over the next morning. He did. They went over to Dr. Bob's home. You could take that down, Andy. And Dr. Bob did not want to meet this, quote, this slug from New York. But Annie was relentless. She was not going to give up. And he agreed to give 15 minutes. That's it. He told Annie, after 15 minutes, I want you knocking on that door and saying, we've got a commitment, we've got somewhere else we have to be. And if you don't agree to do that, I ain't walking into that room. So she agreed. After 15 minutes, she would go in and do that. And before they went off into this other room, they sat down to have some kind of dinner. And Bill noticed that Dr. Bob's hands were shaking and he could barely get the food into his mouth. And Bill just said, you look like you could use a drink, my friend. Why don't we go talk somewhere? And they got up and they went into what's called the White Room in the gatehouse. Andy, if you give us a picture of number 9, the White Room. Some of these pictures you may have seen in previous years of the workshop, but some are new, and this is one of the newer ones. This is a picture of what they call the White Room in the gatehouse. I'll show you the gatehouse in a minute. That this is where Bill and Dr. Bob sat, and the deal was supposed to be 15 minutes, if you remember. Well, when 15 minutes came and a knock on the door came, Dr. Bob said, go away. 6 hours later, they walked out of that room and everything changed. Dr. Bob said, for the first time in my life, I met a man who knew what he was talking about when it came to alcohol. I never met anybody who knew what that was about. This guy knows what he's talking about. And in case you're interested, there's a plaque on the wall there. What it says, it's kind of hard to read, but I can do a bit of a job. It says, I still need others, but now I need them because I have something to give, precisely because I accept my alcoholism, my weakness, my limitation. I found that I have something to give from that very limitation. I'm one who feels that the invitation to wholeness, the opportunity for it, arises from the very weakness of my limitation. And for the alcoholic, that's the meaning of sobriety and of life. Interesting quote. Interesting quote of Dr. Bob's on that flyer, on that whatever it was, picture. All right. Anything else I got for you on that stuff before we get a little newer? Let's look. We're in the book. Remember, it's a big. Oh yeah, there's the gatehouse. That's a picture of the house where they were meeting. That's where Henrietta lived. It was on the Cyberling estate, but she was long divorced from the Cyberling that Bill was afraid of running into. So there really was no connection there to be concerned about. But this is where she lived, in the gatehouse of the Cyberling estate, and that's where they met. Okay. Um, let's take a look at 155. Um, top of the page. I know this is going back a little before where we were last week, but just to review some of this stuff. 155, paragraph 1, begins with his call to a clergyman, Walter Tunks. Now you've got names you could put in there and fill in the blanks. The call to the clergyman's name was Tunks, Walter Tunks, Tunks, led him presently to a certain resident of that town. That resident is Dr. Bob Smith, who, though formerly able and respected, was then nearing the nadir of alcoholic despair. Nadir just means the lowest point. He's bottoming out in his alcoholism. It was the usual situation: home in jeopardy, wife ill, children distracted, bills in arrears, and standing damage. And please highlight, he had a desperate desire to stop. Let's highlight that and circle desperate. Because remember, back in the doctor's opinion, when Dr. Silkworth gave the kind of scenario for how to get someone started in recovery, the first thing is they have to be hopeless. They have to be desperate. They have to have the desperation of drowning men. And then from that desperation, You detoxify the person, and then you introduce them to the solution. They apply the solution, and then you get your change. So he has the first sign, the first thing necessary for that. Um, Desperate desire to stop, but saw no way out. You may want to highlight that too, because that's just another way of saying hopeless. If he's desperate to stop and he saw no way out, he's hopeless. In other words, we're describing the symptoms of a spiritual malady. The typical situation, again, a home in jeopardy, wife ill, children distracted, bills in arrears. He's describing what that is like, what that spiritual malady is like, the tangible evidence of it. Uh, but saw no way out, for he had earnestly tried many avenues of escape. Please highlight and underline this next sentence. Painfully aware of being somehow abnormal, uh, the man did not fully realize what it meant to be an alcoholic. Now let's think about that for a minute. Dr. Bob was a physician. He was a surgeon. He wasn't just, ordinary run-of-the-mill country doctor. He was an intelligent man. His specialty, for what anybody, if you really want to know, he was a proctologist, a surgical proctologist, which meant he did surgery on your procto. And I don't know exactly what the procto is, but I don't want a drunken surgeon touching my procto. So I would stay away from the guy. But the point I'm trying to make with that stupid statement is that he was no fool. He was a physician, he was a surgeon, he was an intelligent man. And he didn't know what it was to be an alcoholic. He could not diagnose himself. That's why he tried. He asked a lot of people. And when he ran into Bill, that's why he said Bill was the first person he ever met who knew what he was talking about. So this intelligent man, this man of science, now for the first time understood what was wrong for him, what was wrong with him. He knew he was somehow abnormal. I don't know if anyone else can identify with that. Did anyone ever feel you're abnormal in the way that you were drinking long before you were declared or you declared yourself an alcoholic? Hell yeah, absolutely. I didn't know what that meant though. I just knew that my using was not the pattern of anybody else's. I'm going through things a lot faster. I'm scaring people who I came to the party with, with the rate at which I was consuming alcohol and drugs. Well, I don't know what's going on, but if you could take that down, thank you very much. Um, so back to the book. When our friend related his experience, again, Bill said, you look like you could use a drink. Let me tell you about my story. He didn't start out by beating him over the head with something he should do, or he was telling him his story. Candy, you trying to get my attention? No?
Yes, yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. I'm sorry. I got lost. Where are we? I'm so sorry.
I don't know where you are. I'm in Altamont Springs, Florida at the moment.
Where are you in the book?
In the book. I'm sorry. I do these stupid things. We're on page 155. We just
Okay,
finished the first paragraph, which starts his call to the clergyman. And where we are now is on the second paragraph that says, when our friend related his experience.
I'm good now. Thank you. Sorry to
You're
bother
always
you.
good. You're always good. No problem. So when our friend, and let's highlight what our friend did. He related his experience. Then underline, if you will, the man agreed. So Bill got his attention by identifying himself as an alcoholic, by explaining what His problem was by giving it a name. Remember, right before he went to Akron, he came home and had a conversation with Annie, with Lois, and he was frustrated that he wasn't getting anybody sober. He's just not succeeding with anybody, and he wasn't. But Lois pointed out, for one thing, there is one person who's staying sober. You are. So don't discount that. But why don't you go talk to Dr. Silkworth and maybe he can give you some advice. He's helped, certainly has helped quite a bit up until now. And the legend, again, it's a legend. There isn't one shred of evidence in writing that this actually took place, but it's the story, the apocryphal legend story, which is he went to Dr. Silkworth because Aunt Lois told him to do that. And Dr. Silkworth said, Bill, you got it all wrong. You're beating people over the head with a spiritual solution when they haven't even asked you for anything. You're just walking up to people on the Bowery in Manhattan, just people sleeping in doorways and saying, hey, let me tell you about my spiritual experience with alcohol. I don't think anybody wants to hear that. They just want to know if you can spare a $5 bill, a couple of bucks for a brother who needs something to drink. They're not listening. They're not listening. So he said, what you need to do is get their attention first. So tell these people your story. And if they're interested, they'll ask you how you did it. If they're not, stop wasting your time and go on to the next. And it makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up when I realize that the very first person who Bill tried that approach with was Dr. Bob. Is it odd or is it God? There are no coincidences. The first person he tried this new approach with was the first person who responded to it. And so it says, he agreed that no amount of willpower he might muster could stop his drinking for long. Let's underline that willpower, self-will. Anything that begins with self is going to be an inadequate, insufficient higher power. We're leading up to the second part of this equation in a way. The first part is that you're an alcoholic. And the second part is that you can't fix yourself. So he's admitting that self-will is not working. Incidentally, notice please the way the sentence ends. It says that a spiritual experience, I'm sorry, no amount of willpower he might muster could stop his drinking for long. There are several times in this book where Bill gives us, where we're being given an example of an inadequate, insufficient higher power. And we're not told that it doesn't ever work. We're told that it doesn't work enough. And in this case, it doesn't stop the drinking for long. What are some of the other examples? Well, in Bill's story, remember he said that fear sobered him up for a bit. In the doctor's opinion, he said frothy emotional appeals seldom suffice, meaning it's not enough. Fear doesn't last for long as an answer. It's not enough. Same thing here. These are all examples of temporary measures to try and deal with a very permanent critical condition. So let's highlight this sentence, if you would. A spiritual experience, he conceded, was absolutely necessary. And please don't miss the fact that absolutely necessary is another way of saying must. So we circle musts in green here at the workshop. I'm sure someone who's got the chat will put the code. Maybe Andy could put it in the chat, the color code that we use for our highlighting. We use green for musts, pink for prayers and promises, etc. And the reason why we do that is not just because I'm anal retentive. The reason why we do that is if you want to find all of the musts in the book, It's a lot easier than going page by page by page if all you do is that. You just thumb through it and look for the things in green, and you'll find it a lot sooner than going page by page by page. So we use must, greens for must, an absolute necessity, an absolutely necessary, tough, is another way of saying must. So he said, but the price seemed high upon the basis suggested. He told how he lived in constant worry about those who might find out about his alcoholism. He had, of course, the familiar alcoholic obsession that few knew of his drinking. Anyone ever have that experience? Right? You think that nobody knows about our using and our drinking? Everybody knows. Everybody knows. So he had that misconception. Um, why, he argued, should he lose the remainder of his business only to bring some more suffering to his family by foolishly admitting his plight to people from whom he made his livelihood? Please highlight this sentence. He would do anything, he said, but that is a reservation. That reservation, and let's identify what the reservation is. He's thinking that no, but first of all, nobody knows about his alcoholism, which is absolute nonsense. People always know. And he's reasoning that it makes sense to protect what's left of my business, to not go around making amends to people because I'm an alcoholic and I might have treated them. That basic instinct, and that's what pride is. It's a basic instinct. Remember when we did our inventory in that third column, what basic instinct was affected by what this person did that made us angry or afraid, etc. We had those basic instincts: pride, self-esteem, security, financial, emotional, physical security, etc. Whatever that basic instinct was. In this case, we're talking about the basic instinct of pride. Pride. And his pride was disguised as reasonable caution, as sound judgment. A doctor who's got this much left of his practice is not going to jeopardize that little bit left just to make an amends for this in this program, because they say you have to do that. So he's saying, I'll do everything, but that one ain't for me. So let's take that one off the list. So he was willing to do anything, but he wasn't. If he was willing to do anything, he would be doing anything. There's one thing he wasn't doing. So he said, how could he would do anything, he said, except that. And one of the things we have to do in the beginning, and this is a term that I think we started using somewhere around the 70s or 80s, when all the rehabs started cropping up all over the place, is the term reservation. That we have to watch for our triggers. Watch your triggers in these hidden reservations. And in this case, the reservation was the pride. His pride was his reservation. And he says that he would do anything except that, but that was what was necessary for him to recover, that without that, he was not going to recover. That's like saying, I'll do anything, but that fourth and fifth step, identification of my defects, nah, not that one. Let's take that off the list too. We're not going to recover unless we identify what those reservations are. And again, reservations are just things that we say, if I come across that situation, I'm going to have to drink. If I have to go to that job interview, I'm going to have to drink. If I have to make this speech in front of a group of people, I'm going to have to drink. Whatever it is we're hanging our hat on, whatever hook we're hanging our hat on, that's a reservation. And remember, reservations are holding a place for something in the future. That's a plan for drinking. We want to have dinner at a particular restaurant, so we make a reservation because we want to have dinner at that restaurant. So we make a reservation. If I have to do this, I'm going to have to drink. So we have to identify those. Continuing, being intrigued, however, he invited our friend to his home. Sometime later, and just as he thought he was getting control of his liquor situation, he went on a roaring bender. Dr. Bob every year would go to the AMA convention, American Medical Association convention in New Jersey. And this particular year was no different than any other year, so he wanted to go. And Annie was terrified. Annie's Dr. Smith's wife. That every time he went in the past, he went on a blazing, roaring bender that it took weeks to come back from. And she was afraid that he's now finally stopped drinking. He goes there. That's a given. He's going to get wasted. And she pled with Bill to please talk him out of this crazy idea. And Bill said, you cannot hide him from the rest of the world. He's going to encounter alcohol for the rest of his life, anywhere he may go. So you can't shield him from the world. You can't shield him from reality. If he's going to drink, he's going to drink. If it's not at this convention, it's going to be somewhere else, some other time. But if he's meant to drink, he's going to drink. You can't hide him. And so he went to this convention, and he did, sure enough, go on a bender. And the story goes that he got drunk on the train on the way to the convention. And he went on a 3-day bender. Then he came back from the convention, took a few days for him to sober up. And on a particular day, he had to do a procedure and to do a surgical procedure. And he was afraid that he may not be able to complete that. His hand was still shaking. He was still withdrawing. Bill had been spending 3 days and 3 nights with him in one room, and he was giving him doses, regular doses of Karo syrup, sauerkraut, and what was the third one? Karo syrup, sauerkraut. I'm sure someone's going to remind me of that. I'm blanking out for that. But if someone could throw it in the chat, we'll all know who it is. It's Karo syrup, sauerkraut. Oh, it's disgusting, but I can't remember what it is. In any case, he went on this bender, came back. The day he performed the surgery was the day of tomato. Thank you. Tomato, sauerkraut, Karo syrup. Thank you for that. Um, ruins your appetite if you haven't eaten dinner yet. But and the day that he performed the surgery was the day of his last drink, because he had a can of beer that Bill had given him on the way, and a goofball. And that was known as his last day of drinking. That was also the day that was recognized as AA's birthday, because the date of Dr. Bob's sobriety is the birth of Alcoholics Anonymous. Before then, it was just Bill. Now there's Bill and Bob, and we have the birth of a fellowship. Now that's what we've been told. That's the story. It's probably not accurate. And Andy, if let's put up some of these. Let's take a look at 10 or 10A. Let me see which ones you got. Yeah, let's take a look at that. June 10th was the day that we've been celebrating Dr. Bob's last drink and the official founding date of AA. But there's evidence that the founders, in trying to reconstruct the history, got the dates wrong, that it was actually June 17th, not June 10th. If that's so, Here's the sequence of events. On Sunday, June 9th, Dr. Bob starts drinking on the train. Monday, the 10th, he stays sober until the evening. Tuesday, the 11th, he checks out of the motel and begins his blackout. The blackout lasted through Wednesday, the 12th. Thursday, the 13th, when he may have arrived back in Akron. He's picked up, we do know, he was picked up at the airport, at the train station in Akron on Friday, June 14th. So as you can see, we're already past June 10th. The nurse has a record that she picked him up on the 14th. And then he started his drying out period on the 15th, 16th, and 17th. That would mean that the date of his last drink would be June 17th. And what you're looking at here is a thing from the Journal of American Medical Association. Andy, if you can drop that down a bit, look what it says under the ad. The meeting began on Monday, June 10th. The convention began on the 10th. That's not the date that Bill came home and did his surgery. In all likelihood, that was June 17th. So we recognize and celebrate our anniversary, the birth of Alcoholics Anonymous, on the 10th. In all likelihood, it was the 17th. However, and you can take that down, Andy. I'd give you a curveball here. Sally Corbett, who is one of the directors of Stepping Stones, the Bill Wilson and Lois Wilson Museum, if you will, in Katona, New York. It's been declared a national historical site. It's an amazing place. If you ever can get an opportunity to go to Katona, New York, that's where you'll see the birth of Alcoholics Anonymous. The things that they've got on display there are just extraordinary, amazing. But Sally Corbett, who is the director up there, says that she has records that there was another convention 3 days before the American Medical Association convention that a lot of specialty doctors attended. You want to know what the specialty was? Proctology. So that meant Dr. Bob, in saying he's going to the convention, could have been referring to the first convention for proctologists that started 3 days earlier. That meant that he could have celebrated his anniversary, as we've said, on the 10th. And because he never got to the regular convention, the AMA convention, he was there for those days that he said he was, but he was at the other convention, got on a train, went home, went through a detox, and so on. So all of these, it's just interesting apocryphal stories that we don't have the greatest paper trail to verify these things. What we know is what we know, and we've been celebrating the 10th as our anniversary, and we will continue to do that. But I just wanted to give you the details as I know it. Okay, so let's get back to the book. Again, the book. On page 155, the last few lines, it says, he went on a roaring bender. For him, it was the spree that ended all sprees. He saw that he would have to face his problems squarely, that God might give him mastery. I'm going to suggest you highlight that sentence. He saw that he would have to, and have to should be highlighted in green, circle it in green, because it's a must. If I have to do something, I must do that. So what did he have to do? He'd have to face his problems squarely. Let's underline that as well as highlight it. And above it, write step one. That's squarely identifying his problems. Step one. That God might give him mastery. Step two. One morning, He took the bull by the horns and, let's highlight, set out to tell those he feared what his trouble had been. In other words, he made amends. He did the surgery. He was supposed to come home right afterwards. He called them at home, told Bill and Annie that the surgery went well, and I'll be home in a little while. And he didn't come home in a little while. And it was getting late into the evening, and they were getting really worried, justifiably so, because maybe he went back on another bender. And when he walked in, they could see that he was a different man. And he apologized for taking so long to get home. But what he was doing was going around Akron, making the amends to the people that he needed to make amends to, because he realized that he's not going to recover until he surrenders entirely to this program. And earlier in that day, before they went to the surgery, when they woke up, Dr. Bob said to Bill, you know, Bill, I'm ready to go through with this thing now. And Bill said, what do you mean, the surgery? Dr. Bob said, nope, both the surgery and the program. I'm ready to commit to it all. And he kept his word. He went out, made amends, never had a drink again. So let's continue the sentence here. Um, Set out to tell those he feared what his trouble had been. In other words, he went on an amender. Our friend Paige, I think, came up with that expression, an amender. When you go out on a bender that doesn't involve alcohol, it's an amender rather than a bender. He found himself surprisingly well received and learned that many knew of his drinking. Duh. What a suggestion. What an amazing concept that is, that they actually knew he was a drunk. Stepping into his car, he made the rounds of people he had hurt. You may want to highlight that, and next to it, I've written amender. He's on an amender. He was on a bender. He's now on an amender. He trembled. Let's underline trembled. And above it, let's write filled with fear. When you're filled with fear, you tremble. But he said he trembled as he went about, for this might mean ruin, particularly to a person in his line of business. Again, he's a colorectal surgeon. um, but it says he trembled, he was filled with fear, but he was tapped into a power that had gotten him to that point, and he was making use of that power. He wasn't running away from that power. He had tapped into that power. So while he trembled with fear, he invited in his creator to give him the strength to get through that fear. Um, at midnight, he came home exhausted, but very happy. Please highlight, underline, and circle this next sentence in orange. He has not had a drink since. And I'm circling it in orange because one of the other color codes we use here is to identify recovered references. We highlight in orange. There's a number of recovered, recovering references, and there's also a number of references to the big no-no, permanent recovery. We're never supposed to say permanent recovery. It's you'll get struck by lightning or something like that. But the book mentions it several times. It is possible to maintain permanence, to attain permanent sobriety, and this was his statement. He hasn't had a drink since. So on that day, to the day he died, he maintained permanent sobriety. He attained, not maintained, attained. And again, the date that they're using is June 10th. Could be the 17th, maybe could be the 14th, but we're using the 10th. As we shall see, he now means a great deal to his community, and the major liabilities of 30 years of hard drinking have been repaired in 4. It takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. But life was not easy for the two friends. Many difficulties presented themselves. Both saw that, let's highlight this, they must keep spiritually active. Must, of course, is in green, highlighted in green. And let's underline active. Remaining active is not sitting around and discussing the Bible. It's not sitting around and discussing your troubles, your problems, and so on. It requires action. Spiritually active. We have to remain spiritually active. Now, the story here, I don't know, Andy, did I give you this one? I don't think I gave you this one. One day they called up the head nurse of a local hospital. The nurse was Miss Hall, Hall. She was the chief admissions nurse at the Akron City Hospital, one of the places where Dr. Bob practiced. Um, and he said, I got a guy here from New York who's got a cure. Right? She did use the word, he did use that word for alcoholism. And you got anybody there checked in that we might be able to talk to who might be an alcoholic? And Nurse Hall said she does. And she finished her explanation about what happened with this guy by saying, by the way, doctor, have you tried it on yourself yet? Now remember, this was a guy who thought nobody knew it. She's the chief nurse at the hospital where he practices, and she knows. That means that everybody knew. So, one day they called up the head nurse at the local hospital. Again, that's Dr. Hall, Nurse Hall. They explained their need and inquired if she had a first-class alcoholic prospect. Yes, she replied. Yeah, we've got a corker. Corker is an expression that we just don't use these days as much as we used then. As per 1930, I think four dictionary, a corker is someone or something that is remarkable or astounding, that it so exceeds the ordinary. It's got to be considered special. Um, I imagine that the term corker came from what happens when a bottle of champagne is corked. It pops up, foams over. It's an extreme example of a reaction. So this guy was a real corker. He was a remarkable, astounding example of what you're describing, Doc. Um, He's just beaten up a couple of nurses, goes off his head completely when he's drinking, but he's a grand chap when he's sober, though he's been here, let's underline this, 8 times in the last 6 months. Can anyone identify with that kind of progression? 8 times in 6 months. Sounds like the usual pattern for one of us. 8 times in 6 months. Understand, he once was a well-known lawyer in town, but just now we've got him strapped down tight. Let's explain who we're talking about. The person that she's describing, his name is Bill Dotson, Dotson. I know I have some of that I could show you. Andy, if you could give me. Oh, I don't have that one down. I thought I had Bill Dotson here. Oh well, I guess I didn't.
We do. We do. I just found it. I'll get it up.
You got it? There we go. Bill Dotson. His story was in the first edition. It's still in the fourth edition as well. His story appears right after Dr. Bob's. It's called appropriately AA number 3. Um, the date that he was admitted was June 26th. The date that Bill and Bob paid him a visit was 2 days later, June 28th. He was a well-known attorney. He ran for various county and city political positions for a number of times and lost every one of them. Um, and so Dr. Bob prescribed some medicines, told him to put him in a private room. Now, I didn't have private rooms. They didn't even have treatment really for alcoholics. So he was admitted under some other diagnosis, and they put him in a supply closet. They had the stuff moved out, wheeled his bed in, strapped him into the bed, and put him in the supply closet. And they limited his diet to sauerkraut and tomatoes and probably Karo syrup as well. This is the guy we're talking about, Bill Dotson. Um, his sobriety date was June 26th. That's the date of his admission, June 26th, 1935. Um, what else can I tell you about him? Uh, he ran for, well, it's going to come up in the next paragraph, so let's just continue with this. Here was a prospect, all right, by the description, none too promising. The use of spiritual principles in such cases was not so well understood as it is now. Again, we're talking about what is likely to be AA number 3 or number 4, because we now know that there was somebody else that Bill and Bob worked with before Bill Dotson. Got your attention? Let's take a look at who that is. Andy, if you can give me um, it's number 20. Number 20 and 21. The man I'm talking about is a gentleman by the name of Fred Breithut, Breithut. Is an interesting, this was in something that was given out at Stepping Stones. On the right is a letter that was written to Bill from Sam Shoemaker, in which he mentions this guy. He said, I hope you realize the guy, the genius, the guy, the guidedness of your having known Jim W. previously as I understood you did in business. His wife, Margaret, is full-time at the group, and he has held out for a long time. You may be just the person that cracks the shell and brings him over. He drinks a lot and is desperately unhappy and inferior and needs what you got for him. I'm grateful for what you did for Fred B. Signed, Sam Shoemaker. And on the left, in some of the details from this Stepping Stones archive, who was this guy? In the second paragraph, it says, an April 1954 letter from Bill to Fred's doctor. It says, as he doubtless told you, Fred was the first alcoholic I talked with following my spiritual experience, which means this guy may even have preceded Dr. Bob. A couple of paragraphs down, in 1956, Bill wrote to Fred, you must know you have naught but the deepest affection from Lois and from me. You must remember that you're the first person I ever tried to help following my own recovery. This is Bill talking to this guy, Fred, saying that he was the first person he ever tried to help. And for that reason, and even more because, Fred, you will always have a very special place of affection in our memories. Fred might be considered Bill's first sponsee. Lois's diary reveals that Fred was a regular at the early AA gatherings. They were the Oxford groups at that time. And on December 31st, 1944, she noted, Bill went to get Freddie in the afternoon, and he's to spend the night. That's who we're talking about. These little stories that drop in every once in a while. This is the guy we're talking about. This guy, Fred Breithaupt. Um, there's the letter that I already read. On the right side is a picture of of Reverend Shoemaker, who is the one who probably introduced them. And on the left is this guy, Fred Breithaupt. And Bill shared his own story with this guy, Fred, about a week or two after being released from Towns Hospital on December 18th. A week or two after he was released. That's a good few months before he went to Akron and met Dr. Bob. So, in all likelihood, this guy could have been our founder number two. Did not apparently drank, but it's interesting when I find it interesting when we find out these little tidbits of AA history. So let's take that down for a minute, and let me see if we can wrap it up here. Um, Put him in a private room. We'll be down. 2 days later, a future fellow of Alcoholics Anonymous stared glassily at the strangers beside his bed. Who are you fellows, and why this private room? I was always in a ward before. Said one of the visitors, we're giving you a, please underline, treatment, not cure, a treatment, a solution, not a cure for alcoholism. Hopelessness was written large on the man's face as he replied, but that's no use. Nothing could fix me. I'm a goner. The last 3 times I got drunk on the way home from here. I'm afraid to go out the door. I can't understand it. For an hour, the two friends told him about their drinking experiences. Let's highlight that and underline their drinking experiences. They got his attention by doing what? Telling their story. They worked it. They told them their story over and over. He would say, yeah, that's me. That's me. I drink like that. So check. Identification has been established. He sees himself and knows what's wrong with him through their stories of themselves. The man in the bed, and this is where I want to wrap it up today, on those words, those 5 words, the man in the bed. Now, very often you'll hear that expression directed at one, give me, if you would, number 12. You'll see this picture in a lot of AA clubs. They call this picture the man in the bed because there is obviously a man and he's sitting in a bed. Now, this is supposed to be Bill Dodson with Dr. Bob and Bill W. sitting next to him in this hospital room. Just to give you some background into this picture, the picture is not called The Man in the Bed. It has been called it, but the title of it originally was called Came to Believe, and it was painted in 1955 by Robert M., obviously a member of the fellowship. He was an illustrator, there you go, for Grapevine, and it appeared in the December issue of that year. The setting in that picture is obviously not in a hospital. Andy, I'll read that, but turn it over so you can take a look at what they're describing. The man in the bed is wearing street clothes, trousers, and an undershirt. Nobody's in the hospital wearing trousers and an undershirt. They're probably in some kind of garb, some kind of robe. If you'll notice on the right-hand side, there's a bottle of alcohol on that dresser. Now, most of the versions of this picture, you will not see that bottle because they cut off the last inch on the right side of the picture, but it's there. I've seen the original of this painting. It's in Stepping Stones in Katona. So once again, that's clearly not a hospital garb because he's wearing street clothes. There's a bottle of alcohol. At the foot of his bed, there are brass bars. That's not a hospital bed. When have you ever seen a brass bed in a hospital room? Not likely to happen. What else can I tell you? They say that the book that one of them is holding is the big book. Cannot be the case because when they met uh, Bill Dotson, there was no such thing as a big book. um, there was barely even AA. In fact, there really wasn't AA at the time. So James just put some stuff in the chat. I hope it's relevant to this. But that's the background on this story. This painting was eventually handed to Bill Wilson in 1956, and it hangs in Bedford Hills at the home today. And it's incredibly beautiful picture. The colors are so crisp and it's amazing. But that's the story of the man in the bed. And I think the title came from, well, obviously a description of the man, he's in a bed, but also from this phrase, the man in the bed, because he was in the bed. But this was not initially a painting of Bill Dodson sitting with Bill and Bob. And that's where we'll stop for today. Pick up there next week. We stop this.